This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were down today as another COVID-19 vaccine delay hurt demand for riskier assets. We saw MSCI's emerging market index falling about 0.2% on the day. Of course, tracking overnight weakness in Wall Street over that delay in new stimulus talks. Now, pretty tepid day across Africa's top markets. South Africa's JSE was firmer today. Traders say the drama in Washington over those stimulus talks is definitely causing some uncertainty there. Now, locally, there was little on the local corporate calendar, while of course retail sales numbers for August are expected later today. Also coming up on today's show, Barrick Gold coughs up $40 million as part of a deal to settle a tax dispute with Tanzania. Shenzhen marks 40 years of leading China's reform and opening up policies. And a coffee campaign is on the move to get Ugandan locals hooked on the beverage health benefits. Well, our starting point tonight is in East Africa, where mining company Barrick Gold has paid about $40 million to the government of Tanzania. Now, the payment by Twiga Minerals Corporation is part of a $300 million settlement between, of course, Tanzania and Barrick Gold, and that's to end a tax dispute. Now, Barrick Gold paid the first installment of $100 million back in May. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more on the story.
This $40 million payout follows a $100 million payment in May. The joint ventures formed in January out of a subsidiary, Acacia Mining, which faced a $300 million tax dispute and an export ban. Tanzania owns 16% and Barrick Gold Corp owns the remaining 84%. After over 2 years of restructuring, the minister in charge says things are changing.
We want to
make Tanzania a hub for mineral trading. And Mr. President, that is possible, not because of some miracle, but by creating a favorable environment for investors, something you are already doing.
Barrick took over the former Acacia Mining's assets in Tanzania a year ago. It has so far paid approximately $205 million to the Tanzanian government in taxes, royalties and dividends. That's in addition to the first payment under the two parties' agreement to settle pre-Barrick disputes.
This payout is due to the government owning 16% of Twiga Minerals. So I would like to thank Barrick for agreeing to get in talks with government because the talks took almost 2 years.
The Twiga Minerals deal provided for a 50-50 share of all economic benefits generated by the mine after the recouping of capital. The government says reviewing mining contracts and enacting laws that protect the country's natural resources over the last years has made today possible. After today, 4 more $40 million payments are expected from Barrick Gold that the government says will be channeled to various development projects. The Tanzanian government will receive 4 more $40 million payments over the next few years.
I know there is still some money left, so go do the math properly. The Minister of Finance is also here. Go do the math and bring more money that can be used to help poor Tanzanians.
The mining sector now accounts for 5% of all the government's revenue, up from 2% less than 2 years ago. Some companies complain that abrupt reforms create uncertainty, but the government says they were necessary to make sure Tanzanians reap the benefits from its own natural resources. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, still on mining matters, South Africa's production has decreased by 3.3% year-on-year in August. The largest negative contributors were gold, iron ore and coal, while the largest positive contributor was platinum group metals. Here's Angelo Coppola with the story.
Seasonally adjusted mining production increased by 6.8% in August compared with July. This followed month-on-month changes of 20.3% in July 2020 and 0.7% in June.
So I think the largest surprise there was the fact that despite gold prices surging, it was the largest detractor to the headline number. So obviously we saw gold production down 3.3% this year, or year on year in August, and obviously gold down about 15% year on year.
The August results specifically in the platinum sector were interesting and slightly confusing.
Obviously, the shutdowns have really hurt volumes for the sector. But at the same time, particularly in the platinum sector, that's really helped prices. So it's kind of been, the shutdowns obviously hurt volumes, but because as a country, South Africa is such a big proportion of PGM supply, it's had a dramatic effect on prices. And so it's worked out okay for the sector.
The mineral sales data followed a similar trend to the production data.
Platinum group metals accounting for, 16 percentage points of the 21% increase in sales. So there, obviously, the platinum group metals certainly being an outstanding sort of driver for both production and sales.
Analysts are also watching iron ore, and not only from a South African production perspective. Brazilian iron ore production is in the balance, with a key producer wanting to ramp up production.
If they are successful in doing that, although it looks like they might have some challenges, that should put a lid or a ceiling on iron ore prices. And iron ore is really important for the JSE. A lot of the major diversified mining companies derive a big portion of their earnings from iron ore.
The outlook for the mining sector remains challenging, electricity being top of mind.
The sector is also struggling to increase capital infrastructure investment. There's also a lot of logistical bottlenecks, not just with roads and rails, but also with port infrastructure.
The mining data for August is interesting, and it also points to the fact that we had a couple of things in our favour this time around, and hopefully that will continue for the next couple of months so that we can get back to full production. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now look at some other corporate headlines today. South African vaccine manufacturer BioVac is in talks with the global COVID-19 vaccine distribution scheme and pharmaceutical companies to produce some vaccines. Now BioVac, which is part owned by the government, says it could produce up to 30 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines per year. But that, of course, will depend on the type of drug that gets to the finish line first. Although it has not yet signed an agreement with the foundation that co-leads the global COVAX scheme, BioVac has been identified as a potential drug product manufacturer. Meanwhile, troubled Botswana retailer Choppies owes Kenyan banks and suppliers over $10 million as it tries to exit the country's retail space. Its planned closure has also sparked a tax dispute with the Kenya Revenue Authority, which is looking to freeze its bank accounts to secure about $1.6 million in taxes. The retailer is also locked in a court battle with the Kenyan Union of Commercial Food and Allied Workers over fears it may quit Kenya without settling unpaid dues of laid-off staff. Meanwhile, Walt Disney has restructured its media and entertainment businesses to accelerate the growth of Disney Plus and other streaming services. The move represents Hollywood's latest move to prioritize streaming media as consumers increasingly gravitate to digital viewing. Now, Disney says it is still committed to theaters and that the new changes only separate creative divisions from its distribution unit. And finally, Apple's latest iPhones won investors over after unveiling lower-priced devices and major design overhauls. At a virtual event, the firm showed off the iPhone 12 in black, red, blue, green and white with a 6.1-inch screen, which is part of the biggest redesign of Apple's signature device in about 3 years. Now, it starts at about $799, but a smaller version, the iPhone 12 mini, costs about $699. We'll bring you, of course, more details of the launch a little later on in the show. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come on the show. Nigeria's dwindling economy weighs on the country's banking sector. And several businesses forced to shut down in Juba as the local currency weakens.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head out now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Nigeria now. The country's economy is projected to expand at less than half the pace needed by banks in the coming year in order to avoid an increase in unpaid loans. Now, the country's 2021 economic outlook was slashed to 1.7% by the International Monetary Fund. That is compared to the 2.6% forecast back in June. This, of course, marks the country as the fourth worst performer amongst nations measured by the Washington-based lender. Nigerian lenders are hoping for an accelerated economic growth after restructuring an estimated 40% of non-performing loans. Analysts are predicting that the credit quality in the banking sector will remain under pressure through the year. Well, let's get some more insight into the future of Nigeria's banking sector. We're joined now by Deji Badmus, and he joins us in Lagos. Always good to have you with us, Deji. Now, of course, Nigerian banks have reorganized loans worth about $20 billion US dollars so far this year. According to Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, non-performing loans have risen 14% in the first half of this year. So is there any idea right now just how much risk this has currently placed on their bottom line? What exactly do their first half results reveal?
Well, Uche, from the first half results, I must say that what we have seen is quite a reversal, so to speak. Contrary to expectations now, the results we have seen, especially from the tier one banks now, have been quite well, maybe not to use the word impressive, but quite good. I mean, obviously, from some of the results that have been released so far, their bottom line to some extent now has been affected. But when you look at the top line, they've actually made up for what some of the losses now they suffered at the level of their bottom line. For instance, almost all of them reporting increase in their gross earnings, and some of them reporting quite massive increases now in their gross earnings, something no one ever expected we were going to see, considering the fact that for a substantial part of that first half now, the country was on lockdown. So their results have been, quite good. As I said, their bottom lines, of course, affected. In some cases, you have situations where profit after tax was lower than what they got last year. But all the same, you look at their gross earnings, you look at their interest income now, you look at what they also made in terms of other indices now. It's not been bad at all. It's been good. And the good thing is that we also saw an improvement now in these non-performing loans that we've been talking about. I mean, it improved from 11 point something percent now to around just slightly over 6%. So really, the banks would tell you all of them are reporting positive results, and they're basically saying there's nothing much to worry about, and that the pandemic has not really done too much damage to the sector.
Well, analysts are saying, though, that earnings per share at Nigerian banks, that could decline 65% this year. Non-performing loans possibly will rise to 7.6% of total credit. So one question is, how bad could this get? And suddenly, could it be approaching anything close to the 2009 and 2010 crisis, where we saw many banks were revealed to be near insolvency due to, of course, non-performing loans and bad loans?
Well, Uche, I really don't think things will get that bad. It's not going to happen. On the basis of the half-year results that we have seen, it's very glaring that we're certainly not going to see that. People had expected the worst now, but it just didn't turn out that way. And remember, the country is now back in almost full steam, and things are moving now. So I don't think some of those forecasts by some of these analysts now would actually come to pass. Of course, when you talk about non-performing loans now, there's every likelihood we might see it get to maybe in the region of the 7% that they are projecting, or something close to that. And that, of course, is understandable. But then when you look at other measures, too, that the central bank is taking, to hedge against especially the issue of non-performing loans now, I think it pretty gives you the confidence that things are certainly not going to go overboard, and that the banks are they're actually on a firm ground, so to speak. So I don't think we're going to see what we saw back in the middle 2000 now. The banks are bucking the trend, so to speak, and somehow, on the basis of the results, as I've said, the basis of the half-year results that we've seen, I don't think there's much to worry about. Of course, we just have to continue to keep an eye now on the non-performing loans, because there's a likelihood that that might go up because of the restructuring that we have seen, and the fact that some businesses have actually taken a direct hit now from the pandemic.
Now, of course, the central bank, meanwhile, is saying it would like to see about 65% of loans in the country restructured by banks. But is it providing any guarantees or putting any measures in place to protect these banks as, of course, they loan out money?
Well, now, one of the important initiatives that the central bank is actually taking in terms of non-performing loans now, I think, is what it calls the global standing instructions. Now, it's a form of protection for the banks now, and also, it provides some kind of guarantee, if you like, that, if people come to banks to borrow money, then the banks will certainly recover this money. And of course, there's a reason why, of course, the central bank suggested and made that proposal that banks should restructure around 60% of their loans, which of course they have done. And because the reasoning of the central bank is that, look, if this was not done, considering the effect of the pandemic on businesses, if that action was not taken, most of these loans would have gone bad immediately. And that, of course, would certainly spell a very bad, it will be bad now for some of the banks. Maybe not the tier 1 banks, but especially for some of probably the regional banks now. So now let's talk about the global standing instruction. It's actually a protection now for banks. So basically it provides that you go to a bank to borrow money, you have to sign up to the global standing instruction. That's the GSI now. And it basically gives banks now the power, so to speak, now to recover whatever you've gone to borrow from the banks, from other banks. So if you borrow, say, from Bank A, and your loan is due for repayment, and you have accounts in other banks, of course, because you have what we call the BVN now, and your accounts are basically linked. So it's Bank A now that you've borrowed from can actually look at your accounts in other banks and seek to recover that loan now, get the money from your other account. So that is some form of protection now for the banks, and it's something that is actually working and has actually given confidence now to the banks now to actually lend. So it's the central bank has actually put measures in place, and even the 65% you talked about, as I said, is also some form of a strategy by the central bank now to ensure that the non-performing loan now does not go beyond a manageable limit, if you like, Uche.
Well, we do have to leave it there, but many thanks as always for your insights, Deji. Of course, that's Deji Badmus joining us there in Lagos. Well, let's stay in Nigeria. The central bank is set to distribute a $196 million youth investment fund. Now, the funds are expected to help cushion small business owners who are hampered by the COVID-19 related disruptions. More than 500,000 people annually are expected to benefit from that fund that also seeks to address Nigeria's burgeoning youth unemployment crisis. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reporting.
Rolex Nosa runs this beauty salon in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The decade-long business currently employs 6 staff. Rolex has been looking to expand, but raising funds for the much-needed equipment has been difficult. His annual turnover of about $13,000 is just enough to cover his running cost. Now he's exploring the option of tapping additional capital from the central bank's Youth Investment Fund.
Whatever amount I get, if I put it into my business, definitely it will take me to a different level and make it a little bit easier for us to access those loans, because sometimes when they say there are loans for us to go get, the conditions, the protocols are always too much. They'll ask you for things that you know you can't reach.
Unemployment rate in Nigeria has been steadily rising and currently stands at 27.1%. According to the country's Bureau of Statistics, the youth are the worst hit. More than half of the close to 22 million unemployed people are young and active Nigerians. But the government hopes to reverse this trend after it unveiled a $195.8 million investment fund for youths across the West African nation.
The two major challenges that entrepreneurs face: number one, access to finance. Number two, access to markets. Hopefully, by the time they have access to finance, they will be able to galvanize enough human and material resources to move from ideation to reality. I'm hopeful that this fund will improve the economy of Nigeria. I'm hoping it will help young people to start off and not look at federal secretariat or state secretariat for jobs, because we also have issues around that.
Accessing previous funds have been tasking for many ordinary Nigerians, but authorities say they've simplified the application process and all applicants would have equal opportunities via a designated portal. Beneficiaries would receive between $650 to $130,000 per applicant. The central bank is targeting over 500,000 beneficiaries. Government's economic team had projected that 39.4 million Nigerians would be unemployed by December 2020. Now, interventions like this Youth Investment Fund are much needed to galvanize the economy towards the path of recovery and get more youths to earn a living. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And to South Sudan now, where businesses in the capital of Juba are facing closures over fears of soaring inflation and the depreciation of the local currency. Now, this comes after the US dollar's exchange rate against the local currency rose to 830, and that's days after the government announced that it will change the currency. The World Bank projects the South Sudanese economy to contract by 3.3% this year. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet reporting.
Joshua Komaket runs a mobile money and boutique business. He says it is hard to set a price in South Sudan's pounds because the local currency is losing value against the dollar almost hourly.
The city council, they wanted money. Now, for us, we cannot operate while hungry. We have to eat something. The prices for the food has gone up also. The rent alone also, we are paying in terms of pound, the rent also has gone up now. So, what we are getting cannot maintain our business to move on. And most of us, some they are running out of the business. Even me myself, operating the business is now hard. We are almost closing the business.
This economic analyst is urging South Sudan's government to make changes to salvage the economy.
All the financial practices and principles have not been followed. The government generated revenues through the non-oil revenues or oil revenues have not been channeled to the right direction. So literally I would say the revenues that the government receives, or the government incomes and the government expenditures, have not been well regulated.
South Sudan's government says the economic crisis is caused by the long civil war and the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, the United Nations warned that more than half of South Sudan's 11 million people were already food insecure. The current inflation is worsening the situation. Officials believe many people are keeping money at home. The central bank, therefore, is finding it hard to implement its monetary policy. The government says it wants the country's currency change. That is resulting in a rush by many to get South Sudan's pounds to the market, which is, in turn, worsening inflation.
The citizens seem to have lost trust in the banking institutions in this country, because you don't know, tomorrow you might go for your currency. We know in the last 2 or 3 years, the banks were unable to give people the money they needed from their accounts.
South Sudan's pound has lost almost 50% of its value against the US dollar between Monday and Wednesday. President Salva Kiir has called for an emergency cabinet meeting to try and find a way to slow inflation. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
And in Tunisia, the central bank is optimistic of a gradual recovery in growth in the second half of this year. However, it has warned that a surge in COVID-19 cases caused by the second wave of the virus could hammer its ailing economy. Tunisia has been grappling to reverse a decade of sluggish growth and high unemployment. It saw its GDP shrink by 21.6% in the second quarter after imposing a costly pandemic-induced lockdown in March. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
Tunisian authorities affirmed that the first wave of COVID-19 was disastrous to the country's ailing economy that has been crippled by high debt and deteriorating public services, and which was made worse by the global coronavirus outbreak. The Central Bank of Tunisia is, however, forecasting a slow recovery following the resumption of economic activities, but estimates that this recovery would only partially compensate for the sharp drop in activity recorded in the first quarter of 2020, after its GDP shrank 11.9% compared to the same period in 2019. Economists are, however, warning of a severe impact of the second wave of COVID-19.
All the economic indicators should take into consideration the second phase of the wave. The second crisis will even be worse than the first one. It will require more drastic measures than the first crisis.
Earlier this month, the central bank lowered its key interest rate by 50 base points to 6.25% for the main refinancing operations, 5.25% for the overnight deposit facility, and 7.25% for the marginal lending facility in a bid to stimulate investment and push faltering growth. But experts say the move is not enough to jumpstart the economy.
This measure is very commendable, but very weak given the current situation. The key interest rate must be lowered in a very significant manner, and all at once, because economic operators and investors are aware that the central bank will soon have to lower even more the key interest rates. Therefore, investors and businesses will have to wait for the right moment, but that will halt the economy from a quick recovery.
Tunisian lawmakers and Finance Commission members at the central bank emphasized that the latest available economic indicators show a gradual recovery in industrial production and foreign trade. However, the recovery of the tourism sector and related services remains hampered by the persistence of the coronavirus crisis.
Tunisia's main economic partners in Europe are affected by a deep crisis. The growth rate is -7 and -10 in some European countries. Consequently, industrial production and foreign trade cannot improve significantly, while the result of tourism and services will remain negative because people are not traveling due to the pandemic.
The central bank revealed in its note on economic and monetary developments that loans to the economy grew by 4.3% in July 2020, compared to 6.2% in 2019, taking advantage of measures taken since March 2020 to limit the negative impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Experts assert that investments have not recovered due to the repercussions of the pandemic, as well as the social and political instability in the country. The central bank has urged the new government to implement structural economic reforms to improve the business climate. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
You are watching Global Business Africa. We're heading into a quick break. Still coming up on the show. Shenzhen marks 40 years of leading China's reform and opening up policies. And tech giant Apple unveils its latest 5G-capable iPhones.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Well, here's a quick recap of today's top headlines. This Wednesday marks the third anniversary of the Mogadishu bombing that claimed the lives of 580 people. Now, on 14th October 2017, a truck loaded with explosives blew up at the busy Zobe intersection in the Somali capital. The bombing is regarded as the biggest terror attack in the country. Meanwhile, a new UN report due to be published has offered a rare glimpse into the finances of Somali militant group Al-Shabaab. The report shows nearly $2.8 million has moved through two accounts at Salam Somali Bank during a 10-week period this year. The militants are said to be moving millions through the formal banking system and investing businesses and real estate. And finally, talks between Libya's rival administrations have ended without reaching tangible results. Negotiations in the Egyptian capital focused on holding elections and a new constitution to guide a political roadmap. Now, offering a draft constitution in a public referendum is expected to be a first step in Libya's transition. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, let's turn our attention now to some international news. Shenzhen has led the way when it comes to China's reform and opening up. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping detailed his vision for Shenzhen in a ceremony which marked 40 years since the establishment of the city's special economic zone. Our reporter Tang Bo with the story.
More than 800 participants gathered as Chinese President Xi Jinping called on the special economic zone to keep contributing to the nation's journey to become a strong socialist modern country.
Shenzhen will build the first demonstration zone of socialism with Chinese characteristics. As a model city of socialist modernization, it will comprehensively deepen reform and expand opening up, and it must promote the construction of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, enrich the implementation of one country, two systems, and take the lead in achieving socialist modernization.
Entrepreneurs and workers also spoke at the celebration. Both have made serious contributions to the enormous changes Shenzhen has witnessed over the past 4 decades. But the past 40 years could just be the beginning. China unveiled a detailed plan Sunday to deepen reforms and introduce new pilot schemes to Shenzhen. The plan's stated aim is to transform the city into a leading example of socialism with Chinese characteristics. The plan outlines wide-ranging reforms to be implemented in Shenzhen, including in the legal, financial, technological, institutional, and social sectors.
The construction of special economic zones in the new era should uphold socialism with Chinese characteristics. We will move forward towards a new development stage, implement the new concepts, promote high-quality development, and build a new pattern. We will advance reform and opening up from a higher starting point and begin a new chapter in building special economic zones.
Driven by the development of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, as well as the promise of these new pilot schemes, expectations are high here that Shenzhen will push forward and strengthen China's reform and opening up. Tangbo, CGTN, Shenzhen, Guangdong Province.
Now, much of Shenzhen's growth was based on manufacturing, but in recent years it has been overtaken by the city's expanding tech industry. The sector has helped put Shenzhen at the forefront of innovation. CGTN's Zhang Dan walks us through its development.
It was a cooperative agreement between two trading companies in December 1978 that marked the start of Shenzhen's economic reform and opening up. The deal put the southern Chinese city on track to what's been described as rapid industrialization and urbanization. In the 1980s, Shenzhen issued a development plan to boost industries involved in science and technology. And it's this document that inspired Ren Zhongfei to get into business and establish what is now known as one of the world's leading telecom firms, Huawei.
When I founded Huawei, I had no experience at all. At that time, we were acting as a sales agent for Hong Kong's Hongnian switches. They sold well, but then they stopped supplying them. That forced us to make them ourselves. We had no other choice.
In 1999, Shenzhen held the first China High-Tech Fair. It was at that event another Chinese tech giant secured its first venture capital funding, worth over $2 million. Over the years, Tencent's growth has earned it a place on the prestigious Fortune Global 500 list of companies.
The key was only through this kind of opportunity could Tencent gain access to capital markets. More than $2 million in financing gave Tencent the foundation to take off.
In the year 2000, the output value of high-tech products in Shenzhen exceeded $14 billion for the first time. Since then, the city sees an average output rate of $10 billion per year. In 2008, Shenzhen was relatively spared from the impact of the global financial crisis. It brought an opportunity to shift gears and focus on emerging industries such as IT and new energy. Within a few years, Shenzhen quickly became China's economic growth engine. Shenzhen's GDP in 2019 was close to 2.7 trillion yuan, or more than $400 million. That's more than the national GDP of Israel. In that same period, the output value of major industrial companies in Shenzhen climbed from $9 million to over $500 billion, with the tech industry in the lead. Last August, the central government issued a document declaring to build Shenzhen into a key pilot zone for socialism with Chinese characteristics. It aims to see the city develop into a global benchmark of competitiveness, innovation, and influence by 2025. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
Well, let's now turn our attention to Apple, which has just unveiled its latest iPhones. There's been the usual chorus of criticism about what the devices offer and what they don't. But what's new is that for the first time, the tech giant is entering the world of 5G. Our reporter Mark New explains.
With a number of competitors having already launched 5G phones, Apple finally got into the game.
Introducing iPhone 12.
Apple launched 4 new iPhones, including the iPhone 12, the iPhone 12 mini, and the larger iPhone 12 Max and iPhone 12 Max Pro.
The one surprise I will say specifically on 5G was the fact that all 4 of them, in the US at least, are going to support all types of 5G service.
That includes support for lower and mid-speed 5G bands that aren't as fast but have greater coverage. Wireless carrier Verizon appeared on stage to showcase how the iPhone 12 could run on its millimeter wave 5G system, providing the fastest speeds in the country.
Verizon, yes, has millimeter wave, but so, by the way, do AT&T and T-Mobile. They just don't have it in as many places. But even though Verizon has it, it's still extraordinarily limited. You know, they talked about adding new cities, but really, it's only a few blocks in certain cities. More than 99% of people who have Verizon don't have access to millimeter wave service.
The iPhone 12 and iPhone 12 mini start at $800 and $600 respectively, while the Pro and Pro Max begin at $1,000 and $1,100. They make some major advancements in photography and videography. That includes incorporating something Apple calls Deep Fusion, which uses machine learning for pixel-by-pixel processing of photos.
They enable powerful computational photography for camera experiences that simply are not possible with traditional cameras. With Deep Fusion, you can even see the detail of her dress in this low light setting. In this classic black and white, you can feel the sun glistening on the horse.
The fact that the iPhone 12 Pro and Pro Max can record 10-bit Dolby Vision HDR video, I know it's quite a mouthful, is really impressive because you haven't been able to get that except on extraordinarily high-end devices.
Apple revived a technology formerly used with its Mac laptops, MagSafe, which allows devices like wireless charging pads to snap directly to it. All the phones have a ceramic shield, which Apple says improves drop performance by 4 times. The Pro versions also have a light detection and ranging scanner, or LiDAR. It's a technology commonly used in self-driving cars, but now allows iPhone users to precisely place objects in augmented reality worlds and map and transform 3D environments. Mark New, CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
Well, let's turn our attention now to commodity markets. Gold prices struggling today to gain traction. Gold was stuck below the key $1,900 per ounce psychological level. That, of course, is as a lack of an agreement on additional U.S. stimulus did help the dollar to stay firm. Now, a strong rise in the dollar seems to be the main catalyst for gold. Meanwhile, oil prices were steady on concerns that fuel demand will continue to falter as rising coronavirus cases across Europe and the U.S., which of course is the world's biggest oil consumer, could impede economic growth. Well, let's take a short break now, still to come. A coffee campaign is on the move to get Ugandan locals hooked on the beverage's health benefits. And we catch up with a South African winemaker who is empowering her peers in the industry.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, promoters of coffee in Uganda are considering hiring foreign expatriates to teach the locals about the health benefits of the beverage. For many in Uganda, coffee is viewed as a cash crop, while some believe it is unhealthy. Well, now, through this campaign, they hope to change people's perceptions about the drink and also attract more consumers. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reporting.
A cup of locally brewed coffee. This is what is attracting consumers to this coffee shop. Promoters of this beverage say it comes with health benefits.
There are so many benefits, of course. One of them is it keeps you alert. So you want definitely you want to doze. You want to look at your body keeps awake.
The Uganda government is now looking out for more expertise in marketing premium coffee for local consumption.
We have started a process where we bring experts from abroad who are medical people, but who have studied coffee, so that they explain to the professionals on how coffee actually has health benefits.
Entrepreneurs have set up more coffee shops to bring the beverage closer to the consumer.
We're putting coffee booths across mainly urban areas so that you don't just look for a coffee shop. Everywhere you go, you can be able to get that cup of coffee, and real good coffee.
In Uganda, a cup of coffee is more pricey than tea. A cup of tea costs about $1, which is half the price of coffee. Coffee enthusiasts now want the price slashed to enable everyone to afford a cup of coffee.
My proposition is that we can come up with more affordable coffee products that can be consumed at the household level in form of sachets that can probably go for a price range of about 500 to 1,000 Uganda shillings. I believe when the price is more affordable, we have a starting point then to communicate other benefits of coffee consumption to the Ugandan.
Statistics from Uganda Coffee Development Authority suggest 6% of Ugandans now drink it, but it's still not a popular drink in the country compared to Ethiopia. Traditionally, most Ugandans are tea drinkers, but baristas here want to change that by preparing a variety of coffee flavors so that they can attract more consumers of the beverage locally. Coffee experts say an increase in domestic consumption could deliver stronger profit margins for producers. Uganda's coffee industry is primarily export-driven. In the last 12 months, the country exported 5.2 million bags worth $502 million. The country aims to produce more than 20 million bags by 2025. To do that, it hopes to expand the export market, but also drive Ugandans towards a domestic coffee culture. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala.
And over in South Africa, Jan van Riebeeck, the first governor of the Cape, planted a vineyard in 1655. Now, on the 2nd of February in 1659, the first wine was made from Cape grapes. This led to the planting of vines on a larger scale at what is known today as Bishop Court Wynberg, and thus began South Africa's wine-making tradition. Well, today, the nation exports over 400 million litres a year. And CGN talked to a winemaker who is inspiring her gender across the globe.
I've realized that I inspire women across the board. It's not just black women in South Africa, it's not just white women, it's just women in general across the board. I got recruited from high school. I was offered a scholarship by South African Airways. So that's basically what brought me into the industry. I didn't even know it existed, you know. So for me, I wanted to study, and this was an opportunity to change my life and study. Delheim was the first place that I came to. When you came for an interview, they were like, so do you know anything about wine? And I was like, I don't, but I'll learn. I remember the general manager here, it was Harald. He was like, I'm going to a winemaker seminar, you're going to come with me. And I got all excited because I'm like starting to be a winemaker, so I'm going to go to the winemaker seminar until I got to the door. And then there was one woman, one. And she was registering everybody. It was all white people, and they were speaking Afrikaans, which was the language I didn't understand. For me, what made me stay, though, is the fascination, the vibe in the cellar during harvest. It was like festivity during harvest. It was just fun. So I did my harvest overseas. I did my harvest in France, Italy, visited New Zealand, USA, just to understand the whole thing. And I was making sure that I built bridges, I met people within the industry. And I decided that my company is going to be named after my late grandmother because she had been everything that a child could wish to have. So for me, she represented love in its totality. So I was like, the company is going to be called Aslina. We are currently producing 4 wines. We've got a Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, and a Bordeaux blend called Umsasane. Umsasane, which is the acacia tree, an iconic tree in Africa. But the reason for it to be a bottle is because it's my grandmother's nickname. So that one is a double dose of grandma. We currently are 85% exports, and then the rest is sold locally. But we are building the local market. Being in farming in general, you're dealing with nature, and you need to understand that nature rules. No matter what we want, nature rules. So we had drought, but what came out is like as much as we had less volumes on what we wanted, but we had beautiful quality of wine. And all of a sudden we got COVID-19, and it's again things that just happen that you, as a person, you've got no control over, and it blocks whatever you're trying to do. So you just need to go with the flow. As Black people, we do not have a generational wealth, and we do not have legacies. So when you're starting from zero, you need to actually put one foot in front of the other to be able to get what you want to get. So I need to work hard, sell the wine, make the wine, sell the wine, and from there, as the company grows, then I can start looking at actually at getting land to be able to have my vineyards and have a winery. I get some of my grapes at Delheim, and then somewhere in Stellenbosch in different farms. So I work with different farms.
We became more than just colleagues, we became friends over the years, and that's how Nsiki sort of grew into being part of our family business. It's been quite a difficult journey, I think, for Nsiki to actually step into an area where she was an outsider, and it's still probably for females more difficult in a male world to play the game that they do.
I've realized that I inspire women across the board. It's not just Black women in South Africa, it's not just white women, it's just women in general across the board. We all have same struggle. We're fighting to be seen, we're fighting to be heard. So for me, it is important as a woman to say, you know what, I've walked the path. So any woman can walk the path.
Well, before we leave you, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. Let's hone in on South Africa's rand. Renewed worries about the country's bloated debt levels put the rand amongst the worst performing emerging market currencies today. Now, the rand shed about 0.7% after Finance Minister Tito Mboweni asked Parliament to postpone the budget by a week. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.